I can show it too.
All right, sweet. Yeah, it's fine. Hey guys, welcome to the $7 to $100 million podcast. It is Tim and Paul, your hosts. Like always, we are live streaming the scaling of our business from 7 to 100. Been making a lot of changes. A few things we've been learning really quickly that I'll share if you are watching these. First is Hormozy told us that no one knows who we are, so we should advertise way more because no one knows who we are. At first we fought it, but then we realized, nah, he's right. No one knows who we are.
Did you ever see him? Just out of curiosity, did you ever see his video where he talks about like when it like really hit him that this was true?
The one about where he was spending like $500,000 a day, and he would walk and meet people, and they still didn't know he was.
Well, yeah, he was in Las Vegas, his hometown. There was a
Yeah.
giant billboard behind him as he was walking that he was paying for, and he had just spent $10 million, and the people knew who he was, and they had no idea about the launch.
Right.
So, like, yeah, $500,000 a day.
He said near the end, his budget on Meta was $500,000 a day. Was what he was spending.
And he's in his hometown with a poster behind him, and the person knows who he is already, and they still have never seen his book.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I didn't know his book was launching either. So
right, I didn't follow him at the time, so I didn't know either. But it was like he said that there was still like he had a huge following, and still it was like 20 or 40% of people that followed him that was in his cohort that like watched his stuff did not know that he was doing a book launch, didn't even know about it.
Yeah, I've been getting his stuff for like multiple years, but I've never gotten that into him. But I never saw those ads either.
Paul, so one thing I want to talk about this morning is I want to talk about, so I've been thinking about this idea of how we drive more profitability, but I think one way we're going to have to do that is this idea of like transformational leadership, where we're going to help people in our company go to the next level. Because I think one thing we're stuck at right now with our current level is people are kind of stuck in their way of thinking and what I do, right? And this idea of competence, like Hormozy says that competence is actually very rare. And so he asked two questions to determine true competence in a role, right? Like, do you really, really know what you're doing and what you need to be doing? And not just what you're doing that you're told to do, but what you're doing to move the ball forward, right? Like what we're doing to move the ball down the field. And I think that's the key play. I think we don't have enough today in our company. We don't have enough people thinking about what would I do next? What is the next thing we need to be doing, building, creating? The two questions he asked to find out if someone's truly competent in the role they're in is, what are the metrics you use to measure your performance? Right? Not that someone else used, but what are the metrics you use to measure your performance? And then he said, how does what you do every day impact those metrics? What you're doing today impact those metrics. And so he said it's actually pretty rare that people know those answers and can answer them effectively, right? Because he said competence is actually quite rare. Which I thought was really interesting. So here's this like conversation that I think we should have, and one thing we should talk through is just across the organization in general, how are we helping people go to the next level with where they are today and then where they have to go to, right? Because as we scale the business itself has to grow, but the people have to grow as well, right? Like people have to be growing and developing and going to this next level. And I think we should be talking about how much work that is, how much energy needs to be put in. There's obviously people who aren't going to be able to go to the next level, who don't want to go to the next level, or who don't have desire to do that. There's obviously going to be that too. But I think we have people who desire to go to the next level, but just don't know what that looks like, right? They're like, they don't even know what it even looks like to go to the next level, what I even need to be doing, right? So I just want to hear your thoughts, and maybe this is something where we need to go get advice on. But what are the right ways, if we were going to truly coach? I mean, sports analogies work really well here, right? What are the right ways to truly expose people to what the next step of what their role should be? Is it us exposing them, or is it more like the catalytic coaching where we have to lay out the vision, and then they have to go get the advice, do the pushing, like push themselves
Yeah.
forward. What are your thoughts on that from what we've been seeing?
Yeah, so I think okay, a couple thoughts. One, when I think about the people in the org that want to grow, I think what is maybe missing is like a overarching clarity on what their role is in the bigger picture. So I think today we have a lot of people sustaining the business because that is what the clarity is for their job. So there's not clarity for their job like, hey, I want you to grow this department to this size, or I want you to solve this specific problem. Now there are people doing that, but they're only people that we've like directly created those types of incentive structures and clear goals for.
Mhm.
So I think today a lot of people don't, uh, you know, well, let's just imagine you're in a position and you want to grow, but if you're not in complete alignment on what the objective is, there's a lot of different directions you could go. And then if you go those directions and they're not rowing the same direction as the leadership is, then you like, it's just a waste of your time ultimately.
Mhm.
So I think probably what we lack is clarity on. So I think to your first question, I think it's a catalytic coaching, but then it's also clarity and direction of where we're going. Because like we've also been in a state of like a lot of agileness recently, where we've
Mhm.
changed overarching direction, and I think it's hard as a employee to know like how do you get the boat rowing the same direction when the boat's been shifting a lot. So I think that's part one that we'd have to do. And then once you kind of give someone a specific problem to solve, then I think that's like when you can truly evaluate, are they solving that specific problem? I think in our current state, a lot of people are solving the problem they perceive that they've been given, and the really good employees are doing that to the best of their ability. But they might know that we have ambitions of growing, but it's not clear their specific role in that. So I think one thing we need to do is like actually
Mm.
define uh, clear, like clear responsibilities on getting to the goal as well. Now, you occasionally would get somebody that it's like anything they touch, they're going to try to do better. But
Right.
even those people, I don't think have like great alignment with the overarching vision of what we're trying to do and like how they would fit into a much bigger goal.
Mhm.
So it's just like solving for a problem that hasn't been defined yet, I think is the biggest challenge we have. It's multifaceted, I think, but to me, that would be the biggest thing right now is like we don't have clear definitions. And kind of to the point of like those workflow charts is, I think something he says is that you have to, like, it's our duty basically to define um, the workflows and find people that can execute them and improve. Well, I just bring in experts and stuff that can even make them better. But
Mhm.
without those first things defined, I think it's hard to know where to contribute. So, kind of long-winded answer, but that would be my first thought.
So do you think it's our responsibility then for each department or each, like, not every single role, but for every department to map out, like, then, like, say this next level of 15 million, right?
Mhm.
Is it our responsibility to map out what that looks like and give it to them and say, this is where we are going, and
Mhm.
this is where we are going. It is your responsibility to figure out for your department how to get your department from where it is today to here,
Yeah.
right? Is that the idea?
Yeah,
Um,
so like Google, for example, has always used objective key results,
okay.
and the core concept of those is that you you don't give people like activity goals, you give people outcome goals. So like a true leader can achieve an outcome. So the way that they develop those is basically from the top. They define the overall strategic vision of where we're going, and some of the key metrics like what's the profitability as we
Mhm.
get there. So what revenue number do we want to get to? What's our profitability goal? So they'll define that at like the highest level of Google, and then they cascade it down. into responsibilities by department, essentially.
Mm.
And so everybody is working in parallel, but it's not, no one's, so like a true leader, like a true lieutenant, you don't need to spell out exactly how to achieve the outcome. But what you do have to give them is the outcome that you want them to achieve. So you have to say, I want you to be able to handle this number of clients or this amount of content at this profitability. And then it's their responsibility without instruction to figure out how to solve for that. And they're measured on the outcome of it, not on the activities, because outcomes are what you need accomplished in an organization. So I think there needs to be a unifying strategic vision that everyone else builds off of. And each department needs to have an outcome, and they could probably be part of the conversation of what those outcomes are. But that's how you get, I think, all the kind of boats row in the same direction.
Mm. Okay, so we have not done a good enough job really laying out what that looks like, and making it really clear for everybody in the organization, essentially.
Yeah, and I think like the same thing on competence could be asked about our understanding of each person's role. And clearly there's some people where it's like
Mm.
we could answer those questions because we understand their role really well.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of vagueness around a lot of the positions at the moment, even in my head, of like what would the successful outcome for the next 6 months look like?
Mm. I think it needs to be done at the manager level, and then the managers need to be strong, because the managers have to be good enough to be able to hire the right talent, not
Yeah.
just immediately run to like quick hire more people, right? Like for example, take the sales team. It's like, for us to increase our sales, we need the right inputs, right? It's
Yep.
actually by decreasing the size of our sales team and focusing on training and closing and the leads and the techniques, right? With a smaller team, we are massively outselling what we were doing with a larger team, right?
Mhm.
And so it comes down to, I think, if I had to say in my understanding of like my position with overseeing sales, it comes down to knowing the proper inputs and the
Mhm.
proper measurement, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what are the real inputs that are going to work, and what is the proper measurement? Um, I like what you said before, which is setting a setting a profitability target that everybody has to flex around. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, like for example, if we said we're going to have a net profit on everything of 30%, right?
Yep.
Or whatever the number was, right? And then we rolled out the organization and said, this is what we're going to do. And so this is not the goal, this is now how we're going to run the business.
Mhm.
So you are required within that constraint to
Yep.
figure it out and work backwards from, this is now the constraint. And so it forces different thinking, because if I come to you and say, Paul, I need you to fit this watermelon in that, jar, you're like, no, it can't be done. Right. You'll tell me all the reasons it can't be done and how it won't fit, and you'd have to cut it and you'd have to
Yep.
do whatever. And it's like, I don't care about any of that. I need you to get this watermelon in that jar. Right. So the question is, man, it all comes down to the questions we ask so
Yep.
much of the time. It's
Well, I
not
think constraints
pattern.
also, yeah, constraints like shape the outcomes a lot. So, it's kind of like there was that one podcast out we were listening to that was the guy talking about scaling the guy's business from 300,000 to a million, and he was
Yeah.
saying like, well, when you hire people, and they start out with a small book of business, you need to be really cautious to tell them that your book of business is eventually going to be this large. So you need to treat the small book of business as though it's that large book of business from the get go. Because otherwise, like without constraints imposed on how much time you spend on a client, you will become you know, their assistant in their
Yeah.
business. So
Right.
like the danger of few clients and not having any physical constraints imposed on you is that you may just start helping them with everything with their business, because every business has a million problems that need solving. And
Right.
so I think that yeah, like we will only get the outcomes of the constraints that I think we share with the whole organization. So yeah, like to me, we really test people's abilities if we say, hey, this is the constraint, let's make it happen. You can figure out how. I'm not going to tell you how to make it happen.
Mhm.
You have to work within these constraints. And I think that if we don't set constraints, then constraints get assumed. And today we function in an organization where there's a ton of assumptions around the constraints. And so that's how people have like constructed the teams and how they run their processes, is with assumptions around what they think the constraints are, kind of through conversations with other people, but it's not like clearly set somewhere.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, yeah, and how what's interesting is how if we don't set I was just thinking about like if if you're trying to force plastic, like you're trying to create like a mold, right? The mold is a constraint. If you take a blob of plastic, you have a specific mold you like extrude it through, right? If you push the plastic through that mold, it will create the constraint. It will look like that mold, right?
Yeah.
Like it'll come out looking like the star or the whatever, right? Cookie cutter is a good example, where you push it in there and the constraint makes it look like that thing. So the constraint that you create is what will the end product will look like the constraint essentially. It'll
Yep.
force it through that bottleneck.
Yeah, and like another good example is just even like a client that I work on, because I have a revenue target every single month that I'm trying to help them achieve.
Yeah.
And if that was all that I had, if they just told me, "Hey, I want you to get revenue as high as possible," then that would be very different than the reality, which is I want you to get revenue as high as possible while maintaining these efficiency or profit margins. I have
Right.
to function very differently with the constraint of profit margin. And so like if we don't actually have like a very clearly defined profit margin by department for the throughput, then someone could be thinking they're doing everything right by achieving the goal that
Mhm.
we've given them. But like I guess what I'm saying is there's multiple ways to hit. I like it's so much easier for me to hit the revenue goal if I don't have to worry about profitability on the accounts that I
Right.
work on. I could just scale
Totally.
budget like really really crazy fast. Um, so I think yeah, like I think that's one thing. That would be one thing I'd want to look more into, is like how do we determine what are the profitabilities for the throughput that we want, kind of cross departmentally, and obviously like the whole entire organization as a whole. I think we have some like really like vague numbers that we kind of go off of, but we
Mhm.
also don't. We're not like, hey, it needs to be this. And maybe that's also where like a fractional CFO like could be really helpful too. Just
Right.
like hey, like you're from all the books of business I've looked at, um, you're overspending on these things, therefore like there's some efficiency problem there that you need to solve for.
Yeah. Yeah, that is actually really interesting. My question would be, so obviously the new products we've developed, like they have different margins than the old products we had. Um, my question would be, what is actually realistically possible, right? Because there's only like there's the like go make this thing happen, but there's also like the realm of
Yeah,
possibility.
you can't like a goal that's too outside of achievable is just stops being a goal very fast. Like
Right, exactly.
no one
Right.
can enforce it, no one believes it's true. It has to be like on the edge of
It has to be on the edge of
possible.
believability
Yeah,
that forces different decisions and like right.
yeah,
Also, I think we have to remember that people generally fear change. And so they fear the change of like changing systems, changing people, right? Changing process, changing how we do things, changing who's in the org. People fear change,
yeah.
right?
And some of that change is justified too. I mean, I think that like fear, it builds from experience too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
a lot of people have been through cycles of changes that have not worked that have made their life a lot more stressful. And
Right.
but there's positive changes that can happen too. So and as a business, we have to constantly push through those.
Right. So I think for us then, being an agency, I think my first question would be, realistically, what is the most profitable a scaling agency? So not
Today.
a
Yeah.
really small agency, right? Like, but a scaling agency, with 10 to 50 million in revenue. How
Mhm.
profitable can an agency really be, right? Um, I
Especially
think
with
that's
the employee size of our size, because that was something in the profitability work that was really interesting, is that once you hit, like, the 40 employee threshold, you start accumulating all of these overhead fees that
right,
start to rack up against profitability. So you have to have a management layer, you have to have an office, you
right,
have to have office furniture, like, all this stuff that, like, previously you didn't have to pay for.
right,
So then, yeah, what's the number it could be?
right. Um, And my question then is the constraint the product itself? So the product must be built and sold very profitably, right? Because there are some products that just are way less profitable than others, right? Restaurants, for example, right?
Mhm,
A restaurant's product is just far less profitable than a SaaS business, because the SaaS product can be built and then it can be resold with almost zero, incremental cost of each new customer.
mhm,
I think one thing we're learning is with SEO, and especially one thing we talked about yesterday, which is SEO that has morphed into being a lot of different SOWs for a lot of different companies, right? That is very challenging to keep profitable because it's very bespoke, and
mhm,
so that works when the fees are very, very high. But if the fees are not, above 8, 9, 10,000 a month, it's very hard to make that profitable,
mhm.
because it's just too inconsistent of service and too difficult to scale, right?
Yeah.
So I actually wonder then. I'm actually curious on the thinking there. Is there like pre and post? So is there like pre like so the other question is, what's the simplest way to get there, right? What's the simplest way to achieve the objective? So if we take our new products, right? If our new products have a higher margin and they're going to work better, they're going to be simpler, they're going to have a higher margin, right?
Mhm.
And obviously we want to sell as many of those as we can. The question I have is is it is it actually possible to change the profitability of the whole org? If we have 10 new clients on the new product and we have 110 clients on the old product, and the
Mhm.
old product runs at a 10% margin and the new product is a 20% margin. I'm just making these numbers up, right? It's double the margin. Wouldn't the better move, instead of trying to like ultra rebuild everything for the old product to try to make it as profitable as possible, would the better move be to focus all energy on how to sell as many of the new product and make sure to keep it profitable? Would that be a better, like, use of energy, essentially, right?
Yeah, I
um
think as a big picture thing, yes. Like, I think definitely that's like, in terms of your big picture focus, like, it's a lot easier well, I don't know if it's easier, but it's probably a lot more, uh, like, realistic to be successful in selling a bunch of new products and building, like, essentially kinda refilling the system with better deals. But I do think there could be some high leverage, easy changes to get more efficiency out of the existing book of business. So that's like price increases in appropriate places,
right,
uh, not leaning in like way overboard on clients. So some of the stuff we talked about last night, I do think those some of those changes are relatively easy, but I do think milking a ton of profit out of a bunch of very established relationships is a very kind of like tricky balance game, and dangerous game, I would say. It's all it takes is shaking up a few relationships and losing those clients to completely offset the gained profit. So you have to do it like very delicately. It's like, like cutting out like a tumor or something without like damaging everything else around it. Um,
Mhm.
so that's where I think I think like realistically there well, so I think for us, for example, there I think there's a fair bit of money that's probably just left on the table because we haven't done like price increases and things like that. And there's also some bad habits we probably have of like over delivering where we shouldn't, and it's eating up our capacity. And then as we let's say we do add in these new clients, if we can make some efficiency improvements on the current book, that's going to then allow us to handle the new book with without hiring more like headcount. So I think that's where that's the easiest place to get wins. So if we're going to bring in like 20 new clients a month, if we can free up time of the current team, that's actually where we will have a lot more profitability because all the new packages will be able to service with fewer people. Because like even at let's say you add 20 clients a month and you assume each like ads manager can handle 20 clients, like you're gonna have to start hiring really, really quickly. Um, you only almost have to hire a new person every single month. But
Right.
if we could take the existing team and for the first 3 months we don't have to hire another person, that's a substantial amount of gained profit for us.
Mhm. Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, I think what we should do is model this out in terms of like selling the new products um, versus the current product,
Mhm.
and also looking at just the efficiencies as well too. So the efficiency gain of the current team. I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, and not scaling up the old unprofitable product, but scaling up the new profitable product, and also proving it out, right?
Mhm.
Um, and not allowing the unprofitable product like systems to bleed over to the new, more profitable product, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we should actually probably model this out.
Mhm.
And then I agree, we should come back to the team with the proper constraints and say, here's how profitably you must run your department or your whatever, right? So we have to do more with less, but it's not doing more with less. It's being more efficient and thinking differently and saying, what do I not need to be doing? What is not really driving the result, right? How can I do it differently? So a good example of that is with sales team. We were cold calling and we were generating revenue, but we then learned, okay, for actually the same amount of money as we are spending on a team of cold callers, we could advertise. We'll have to do it differently. We'll have to do different things, but if we advertise and then people come to us, we actually sell more revenue more quickly, more easily for the same spend. But the same
Mhm.
spend generates wildly better results, right? So it's that like different thinking that we're going to have to bring into the organization where
Mhm.
like we are not going to go to the next level by doing the exact same thing the exact same way,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also think that it's unrealistic for you and I to push everything. Like this is going to have to be happening across the organization.
Yeah.
It can't just come from us. If it's only us pushing, the organization will stay at the same size.
I think that all that we need to do is define the constraints and have some like accountability to them. Because if we define the constraints and then someone can't achieve the constraints, then it's clear that they don't have the like lieutenant capability yet.
Yeah.
Assuming that we gave them like, like what we're talking about, like realistic outcomes to go for, not like insanely impossible things. Um, but I don't think we need to push people and tell people how to do things, but I do think we need to tell people what the constraints are as we put more clients through the system and we continue to manage our current ones.
Right. Yeah, because we are trying to scale the business, but we have to scale based on profitability, not based on revenue, right?
Yeah.
Like profitability matters far more than revenue because profitability allows us to actually scale the current model that's working,
Yeah, because
right?
if you think, I would give you, I think about the operations team. Just as I'm just talking out loud, it's like I think like there's a fair number of like competing objectives that actually that interfere with each other that we have kind of like they are probably assuming are the constraints. So for example, don't let clients churn. Don't let clients churn if that's the constraint that you feel is you're being held most accountable to. Well, that actually could result in a lot of the unprofitable behaviors that we don't want, but then they could be achieving that very effectively. So,
Mhm.
and it's like figuring out I think there's just a lot where and then you know, I think yeah, that one itself has a lot of downstream impact, not letting clients churn. Because also it's like, well, if we're short on people and there's a risk to that a client gets upset because something gets delayed, then I'm going to hire another person because my main objective is to not let clients churn. Versus, okay, we can have a little bit. This is the churn goal, but this is also the profit goal that I need to try to fit this inside of. So how can I achieve this? How can I prevent churn but stay in this profit range? They all can just like they can lead to completely different behaviors that like are contradictory to each other. Like not letting people churn could actually be like a recipe for become as unprofitable as possible on everything that you do. uh,
Well, yeah, and I think the don't let people churn is if the goal is maximizing MRR and believing that MRR leads to profit, then
yeah,
yes.
right.
But I think where the breakdown is that MRR does not necessarily lead to profit unless the MRR is like the product being sold as is profitable product, right?
Yeah, and the
Uh,
services being offered are within
correct.
reason. Yeah,
Services being offered are within reason and they're sold at a high value.
yeah,
So I think that's ultimately the key, in my opinion, is you cannot make the restaurant wildly more profitable by just offering worse service. People won't come back, right? You have to, if you're going to try to make the restaurant more profitable, you have to charge more. You have to make it bougier, where people pay $20 versus paying $10, and you have to try to increase the actual average order value, but the egg still costs the same, right? The egg still costs 30 cents,
yeah,
right? Now you sell it for $20 and not $2, right? There's just the only way to do it. Um, so I think what's actually interesting is what we could look at it is like if we take the current business and we say we need to double the margins on the current business, those margins still might be less than half of what they could be on new, more profitable product,
mm,
but it's the best we can squeeze out of the old model. And then the whole focus should be on selling the most profitable stuff, right? And like tying everything to profitability. And I think that's going to be tough at scale for like this will be something we will figure out, but that'll be tough at scale at first for the organization because I think people have no control over that. Like they don't most of the employees don't have control over what is sold, what is built, how the packages are built, how it's built for profitability. So like they can't control that. So they can't really control the profitability if someone sets the menu prices at $5 and the eggs cost 50 cents. Like there's not much they can control within that, right? The
yeah,
true levers we have to pull is what are the menu prices set at, the marketing that drives people in the restaurant, and how much the egg costs. And then within that, it's like
yeah,
keep it like so it's almost like keep it profitable. Don't you can't make it like it's not the employee's job kind of to make it profitable. It's the employee's job not to make it to unmake it profitable,
yep,
right?
yeah, the pricing, essentially what you're saying, yeah, is like it comes down to like pricing and the product design mostly that determines profit. The employee can only, you know, essentially execute very inefficiently and overhire and drive that profit down from what it could be.
Right.
I was actually talking to somebody about this, but something Hermosi has said that like made me realize something too is like I think with like package pricing, there's this idea when you sell something that like you're kind of doing somebody a service by selling them something that doesn't have profit baked into it. So like let's say you're selling to a friend. Um, you're like, I'm going to give you a package that is, I'm going to basically sell it to you at cost. Well, something I've thought about is that on a micro level, that might feel like you're doing a service to that person, but like on a macro level as an organization, those types of behaviors actually hurt everybody, ultimately. So, uh, so I think our team needs to get more comfortable that we actually, if we want to serve everyone really well, we actually need to have really good margin on our products, because not having margin leads to the teams getting crunched smaller and smaller in order to make margin. The level of expertise that we can hire going down because we have less to work with. And so, actually, if we want to do best by our clients, we're actually better off in the macro picture of selling them more profitable deals for us. So any given client, at any given point in time, might feel like, oh, that like I'm not getting as much out of this. But for us to service all of our clients really well in the big picture, it's actually better for everybody if there's more profit, not just us, but also our clients, interestingly.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so takeaways for today is we need to, so for our old product, I think the decision needs to get made. What is the margin? What is the constraint margin we are going to operate under for the kind of old business, if you will? Right. This is what's possible, but this is the constraint margin we're going to operate under. Therefore, here's the constraints we need to now impose. Right.
Mhm.
And then work backwards from these. Then for the new product, it's already built to be more profitable. So for the new product, it's going to simply be like protecting it from becoming unprofitable and saying, no, we're going to deliver this very profitably, right? And then it's the focus on selling those, right?
Mhm.
Selling these very profitable products. Now, the new packages I feel are significantly more profitable. Right. So we need to apply the stuff we talked about yesterday, which is we have to charge for out-of-scope stuff. Right. We need to charge for out-of-scope things. So when there's extra service that's added, we just have to charge more for it. So there's a higher average order value. We need to do price increases. Basically, we need to not operate under fear of churn, like fear of charging more. We're operating under, we are driving for profitability. That is the most important thing, right?
Mhm.
The most important thing is profitability. And if we can't be profitable on an account, it's not better to have that account, right? It's better to have accounts that are very profitable, but not have accounts that are not profitable, right? And I know that's something Josh has been saying for a long time. I think though that has to be applied across the organization though, because like to my example yesterday, if you take an account manager who has 15 accounts and they have two unprofitable accounts at the bottom of their book, and then you just remove those two unprofitable accounts, all that's going to happen is Parkinson's law. The work is now going to just fill that same void. We now lost those two accounts from a revenue standpoint. We didn't cut any expenses though. We still have all the same employees. We're just going to cut profit.
Yeah, it
So
only helps if it adds efficiency for that person. So if you cut their two worst clients and then you sell four new clients, and now they can handle 19 clients instead of 15, then
correct.
yeah.
That's the only way this helps.
Yeah.
So to me, I think the challenging part of what we would face with kind of restructuring the current for profitability is it's going to be very difficult to untangle like 40 or 50 employees and exactly what is getting done and the complexity of SOWs and extra things and leaning in and all that stuff. That's going to be very difficult to untangle.
Mhm.
Just realistically, that's going to take a
Yeah, it's a
ton of work.
massive system with tons of variables and
Right.
like like a really complex system. It's like you're more likely to hurt it than to improve it most of the time you touch it.
Right, exactly, because you have other people who have, like, built things, and you come in and you make changes that you just don't understand.
Mhm.
So to me, that's why I've always fought that is because I don't think that's the answer, because, like, if you have a DSC running a book of $1,000,000, let's say, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then the DSC doesn't have support, they can't run the $1,000,000 book. Where we become unprofitable on the work is when the DSC has too much support. So then now they've recruited too much support, and now they're like a CEO, just quarterbacking tons of other work. But then the work being done is being done at $1,000,000. right? And so the work is now the exact same price as what they're paying, and now it's not profitable. And so it's, to your point, we've leaned in and offered too much service for the client that it's giving them too much value, and then we are unprofitable. So I think in that case, it's the only way to fix that is price increase. That's number one. Number two is I think it has to be built differently from the beginning, because I think if we start kind of onesie twosieing this, it doesn't actually have the desired effect. Because, right, what's going to happen, just like real talk, is if you have 8 account managers carrying a book of $1 million each, and then there's ads people, there's project managers, there's writers, there's techs, there's link building. What's going to happen is, even if you churned out your lowest profitable clients and you lost one DSC, all the other 7 DSCs are still going to want the other support roles and functions, right? So basically, I don't actually believe there's an effective way to pull enough out of there to actually overcome the churn cost. I don't actually think it works. I think what ends up happening is you churn out your bottom 10 or 20% of clients, and you still need a very similar size team to deliver, and now you're just wildly unprofitable on the work.
Yeah, it's kind of like
I think you
yeah,
dumpster your
massive Parkinson's law thing. And also I think it's like, yeah, time work will fill the time that you give it. And so if you have a smaller book, you'll just find more stuff to do for that smaller book. But then you'll
Right.
also become
Right.
accustomed to a smaller book, and then it will feel painful to raise the size of your book. You'll
Right.
object to it, and then there'll be new hires. It's just like a vicious cycle.
Right. So, so realistically, how profitable can an agency actually run at? Like,
I think it depends on the size of the organization. I think that the larger you get, the less profitable you're likely to be on the same business model. So then I think we need to figure out, for where we're at today, where we want to go, what does it need to be? This would be a great, fantastic question if we could somehow ask Hermosi, because he has such a portfolio of businesses that
well, for
he could probably tell us.
$135,000, we could
Yeah,
ask for Mosey.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if we wanted to pay that, maybe that is worth it. Don't know, but all right. So I think this is something. Let's talk offline about that. Is the best way to overcome that conversation, like the best way to set that constraint and overcome that issue. But I agree with you. As you start to scale the business, you're going to become less profitable because you start adding layers of management and overhead and all of that stuff, which is going to eat up margin. And it
Yep.
only makes sense to have those if you can actually drive the margin. So I think the short answer is, for the current book, what we need to do is probably roll out and say, here's the net profit margin we need to run at. Therefore, like, this is the constraint we need to deliver. Therefore, we have to stop offering things that don't, any work that causes this profitability to drop, we have to stop doing, or we have to start charging for it at a higher rate, whatever. But we need to drive this level of margin within this business.
Yep.
This is what
I
we
bet
need.
let me do some deep research too, or like see if AI can look into this, because I bet there's like also some like known numbers out there of like, if you want to scale from this size to this size, you're gonna need to invest this much more into marketing,
Yeah.
and your margin on your product's gonna need to be this high in order to support that, and your payback period's gonna need to be this. Like, so I you know, like, we're really focused right now, I'd say, like, on the customer acquisition side, but then there's also like the lifetime gross profit formula. And so one downside to all this like to the new packages that we don't know yet, is what the lifetime gross profit is. So like, the danger is that, the clients don't stay as long. I think we need to proceed with it, because I think we're over delivering in a lot of cases. But we're
Yeah.
gonna have to figure out, like, it's just, I think it's kind of like one of those things where you're always kind of, I don't know what the good analogy is, but it's like you're spinning a plate, and then you have to go like spin another plate, and then you have to come back and spin that plate again. Like, you're keeping all these plates spinning constantly.
Yep.
That's like, we gotta work on cost of customer acquisition, then we have to work on lifetime gross value, and sorry, gross profit, lifetime value, gross profit. But yeah.
Yeah. I would say that a healthy agency, like a really good margin for an agency, is probably 30%. Like net 30% would be my gut. Um, that would probably be the proper number, is 30%. Like a really profitable agency is like 40, 50% net. A like good agency is 30% net. And an average agency, I would say, is like 15 to 20.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I would say. Um, so that would mean, like, just doing simple math, is if we were going to run at an actual net margin of, 30%, that would mean for every million, right, we'd be generating $300,000 in actual net profit, right?
Yep.
So the question is, how exactly do we drive that? Yeah, and then looking at ours, so we would basically need to cut $1 million out of expenditure, right?
Yeah,
We
I
would
think
need
it's
to
a good
drive an
exercise
extra
to look at
million.
like what like yeah, how like is what's actually possible. Like a million might not be possible, but we should at least see what is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I do now see the power of what you sell and making what you sell very profitable, because it is very hard to fix downstream unprofitable, like a
Yep,
product design.
and as you grow, your profitability, uh, decays, and so
Goes
where you
down.
started with is like yeah, where you started determines if it decays to a, like, unscalable rate or if it still is pretty sustainable as you scale. So if you start too low, then you'll scale and then you'll just be stuck.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm
Yeah.
gonna actually model this out, from a because the new packages are much more profitable. But one thing we could do, Paul, is we could artificially limit what our programs even are, and we could limit the programs to the most profitable thing that we have, and then that becomes what we build our ads around. That becomes what we build our product around, our process around, which obviously then can be niching as well too. But then the whole thing and the whole goal is focused around profit, right?
Mhm.
It's focused around the most profitable, simplest way for us to execute and run the business, because it does have to start. The product has to be profitable from the very beginning. You can't fix it in post, right? You can't fix it in post production if it's not profitable enough.
Yep.
Um, and you can only squeeze so much out of it, right? Like, I think Warren Buffett said this, like, he looks for really good businesses better than just amazing operators, because you can have an amazing operator and there's just still only so much margin they can squeeze out of a really low margin business,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that makes sense.
Versus the greenfield opportunity. So,
Yep.
all right, cool. That sounds good. That's some stuff that we can start working on and, like, working through and figuring out. And then I think the next question would be, if we wanted to sell, it seems to me that ad-based programs are more profitable than SEO-based programs, because SEO takes so much more work, so much more complexity involved.
Mhm.
Has that been your experience?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and I think that is sort of thinking back to, like, some of the conversations we've had with, like, was it Mountain? That big PE firm at one point we were talking to, like, just
Oh,
to get
Mountain Gate.
advice from Mountain Gate. I think that was, like I think their point is, like, it's also more scalable because it's, like, higher margin and it's the clients stay the lifetime value of the clients is higher. So, like, SEO is, like, just a harder product to scale because it's, more complex, takes longer to work, um, and the client's lifetime value tends to be lower.
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. Well, we're ended here. Got to run to the next thing. So great seeing you guys. Great chatting. And Paul, we'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll see you.
See you guys.